Yellowstone is Paramount TV's intense modern Western drama about a powerful family under constant threat. I am Rob Licuria, senior editor at Gold Derby, here with star Kevin Costner, who plays ranch patriarch John Dutton. Kevin, season 2 sets up this epic power struggle, summed up when John says to favourite son Casey, "It's the one constant in life. You build something worth having, someone's going to try to take it." To me, it felt like the show really upped the ante last season. How satisfying was season 2 for you?
Well, I think in life we're looking to up things, and when you're speaking dramatically, that's what you want to do, and you want to try to stay within reason. You want to stay within the scope of things, and you also want to kind of test the boundaries. And it has gotten wilder, if you will. The characters are actually holding pretty consistent, but really outrageous behavior. Maybe we want to vicariously live through the days where we'd like to arbitrate our own problems instead of, like, when you feel offended, you have to call your lawyer. When your neighbor, is like bugging you or your wife or whatever, you feel like you would like to handle it, but now you got to call a lawyer, or you got to call an agent, or you got to call a PR person. And I think there's something in us that deep down, we would love to be able to sometimes have the satisfaction of arbitrating our own problems. So I think without people knowing it, they tie in a little bit to that kind of taking a level of justice, what is perceived as justice, um, and enjoying that idea.
Yeah,
Personally, that's kind of what I think.
I think you're so right, because to me, it's kind of like why people love stories about the mob or about organised crime, because people take matters into their own hands, and that's something that your character John Dutton does, because he's continually pushed and pushed and pushed by the forces outside until the point where he breaks when his grandson is abducted and he realizes, okay, now I'm going to take justice into my own hands. Is that kind of storyline satisfying as the number one on the call sheet, to be playing a character who is quite complicated, and his motivations are good, but the way he goes about them may be questionable?
Really, they're really questionable. I mean, you don't get into trouble too much unless you put the correct title, when you put the correct title on what it is you're doing. And one could argue easily that it's murder. John Ardo said it, argues or lives with his own conscience as somebody who's crossed the line. He's definitely not going into other people's property. He's definitely not going after other people's children. But when it's perceived that they're coming after him, he hits back twice as hard.
Yeah. Now, I was thinking back over your career, and other than Hatfield and McCoy's a few years ago, this is your first long-term role on television. And a lot of people have already really asked you about this, but I'm curious why this particular project appealed to you and you decided to move on to something a bit more long-term and on television.
Yeah, well, and honestly, it wasn't supposed to be a series when I was first approached with it. It was going to be one long, 10 a long episode, a 10 episode.
Yeah.
It was going to finish there. It was going to have its story arc, and that's how it was presented to me. And then halfway through, it switched to something else, and I had a moment where I could have legitimately jumped off and said, "Wait a second, that's not what we've been talking about." But I elected, for my own reasons, not to do that. And so I'm dealing with a situation. It's been a wonderful, the show has been wonderfully received, but I'm dealing with it in a way that was not anticipated, to be perfectly honest.
Fair enough. What I love, there's a lot of things I love about the show. I think it's beautiful. It looks and sounds incredible, but I really admire how the show doesn't glamorize the modern West. It challenges our traditional ideas on what the great Wild West looks like these days. It's violent, it's corrupt, it's lawless. What are your thoughts on how the show is rooted in reality and what's going on in this part of America that many of us are not really aware of?
Yeah, the realities are this kind of work is being done every day. People on horseback, harvesting, watching cattle, moving things around. That's really, part of the American psyche is the cowboy. And that hasn't really left so many areas in the United States. It's still done every day. Obviously, when you create a melodrama, you have to have things that are very heightened. but when you do that well, and I think Taylor does that really well, in his writing, he really heightens situations, and the dialogue is sharp and clever, and you put that against the imagery that we somehow lost contact with, that these places still exist. These mountains, they're not going anywhere, and they're so beautiful. And this land, is worth fighting for, is the concept. It plays with people, running rivers, running horses, freedom, defend what's yours. That's playing into a certain psyche for sure.
Yeah, do you get a lot of feedback about how it plays into a certain psyche? I was reading the other day that this show would appeal to, right-wing voters, and if anyone knows you and knows your background, that's a complete antithesis of who you are personally. But are you aware of how this show plays to that Americana
Yeah, of
mentality?
course. Yeah, I'm not naive about that. I understand that. That's the direction the show's going, and I'm doing my level best to play this fictional character.
I mean, Taylor Sheridan is an incredible writer, and his wheelhouse is absolutely the modern Western, given what he's done previously. What would you say his strengths are as a writer and creator now that you've worked with him?
I think he's a wordsmith, and they have a lot of heart, and there's a lot of humor that can come out of it. There's a shock value to a lot of it. He's saying things subconsciously that a lot of people would like to say. He creates worthy opponents, so that there's just not one person smarter than the rest, and everybody else is dumb and become conveniences to knock down. I think he's created a nice chess game, going back and forth between the people, and he loves that world, and I embrace the outdoors in the exact same way.
Mm. One of the highlights of the show is the portrayal of a dysfunctional family like the Duttons, and how surprisingly relatable it can be, because every family has its ups and downs, but ultimately they will do anything for each other against a common enemy, at any cost or consequence. How do you feel about how universal that theme is, which kind of goes throughout the whole show?
Yeah, well, that's a recipe for disaster, when everybody's willing to follow somebody who's acting immorally because they're family. We're raised to support and be loyal, but we're also raised to think for ourselves. And when we see injustice, we confront it anywhere we find it. And once or twice, you can side with your family over certain issues, but if they cross a level of line, I don't think that's the best. I don't think that's the best measure of a family, that one will tolerate something that is beyond the pale.
Yeah, and it comes out most.
I mean, you can continue to love them and support them, but you don't have to become that, to the degree that you can support it.
And yet, time and time again on this show, people fall into line behind John, and the war that he's waging. I was really taken aback by midway through the season, when the relationship between John and Janie really starts to become a bit more explained. We see the flashbacks, and then Janie murders that journalist. John doesn't support him, but he only intervenes later when he's got to stop his son from shooting himself. There was a lot there to unpack. And I was wondering, when you first received those scripts, what were your thoughts on how you're going to tackle that really complicated relationship between father?
Yeah, well, that complication, that relationship is inside the director's head and the writer's head, or inside the writer's head, the creator. And I've had to deal with those realities as they come at me. And yeah, that relationship is an uncomfortable one. It's a very mixed bag for me. But this is play acting, and this is the direction they want to go. So I find the best way I can play it, and have tried to go along with the vision of where they want to go with it. There's moments, I'll maybe suggest something else, but at the end of the day, I know what you're talking about, and I'm not surprised because I talked about the very same thing.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. I mean, the psychology between the two of them really resonated with me, and then to see the difference in how John treats his other kids and his adopted.
Yeah, well, when you treat somebody some way, you want to understand some of the facts behind it.
Yeah,
It's like if you say something on screen, uh, you can't trust him. You have to be able to look backwards and see where that occurred. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean it doesn't mean some things can't be a mystery, but I think they're going to try to cinch those things up. You know what I mean? They're going to try to tighten that up. It won't make it less uncomfortable or powerful in certain ways, or, like I say, uncomfortable,
yeah,
or powerful, depending on, what you think you're watching. Whenever you raise a hand to a child, a solid fist, that's, we all understand that. And for somebody like yourself, I don't think you're wrong to feel it all. My God, what is that about? That's just being an animal.
yeah.
uh, and so does it fly under the cover of being out there and being a rancher? I don't know. It's up, but I'm trying to do it in an unflinching way.
Yeah, and
That's
it really works. And speaking of that, the finale was pretty explosive. It was when the Becks and the Duttons go to war, literally. And
right.
the highlight scene for me is between you and Neil McDonough in the reeds as he's bleeding out. Obviously, that's the crescendo to a really great episode. What was that like for you to film that scene with Neil? He's a great actor, and you both, I think, pulled it off beautifully.
Well, I've never seen it because I haven't watched it, but I really, no, I purposely don't. I worked really hard on it. The writing was very good at that moment, right there between those two. It was really powerful what I read. And so I don't want to look back at it and know anything was taken out. I just don't want it because I felt it was really powerful too. If I would look at it now and it seemed like it was 70% of what it was, I'll feel bad. So what I did, I poured myself into what it was. And I believed in every word I was kind of saying. And a lot of it needed to be said. And Neil is a great scene partner. This isn't the first time we've worked together. We worked together in The Guardian. And he's really, a wonderful actor. So yeah, I poured everything, like, whatever trick in the book I could create as an actor to make it seem real to who's ever watching at that moment. That's what I did.
Yeah, it was unflinching, and it was typically for John, as you play him, he's pretty restrained most of the time, but in that moment when all he really wants is to get his grandson back, it actually was really riveting. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd share that. Yeah. So has anything ever shocked you on this show when picking up and reading a new script and you think, and it's kind of taken you a while to kind of figure out how you're going to bring it to life?
Yeah, that happens. That happens actually in almost all scripts. It's almost whenever it has to be well written, because if it shocks me, it's bad. That's a problem, But I think most of the movies, there's something I have in common where I read 2 or 3 scenes and I go, ooh, those are going to be difficult days. And I really think I'm the right guy to say those lines. But I have to find a way to take what looks maybe uncomfortable, what seems maybe confident, and I have got to blend this for an audience and do it in a way that's not winking at them, but I'm just committed to what it is. And so I've seen a lot of those scenes. I think, wow, and I've been pleasantly surprised with a lot of the set pieces. Been really nice.
Yeah.
Really, really nice.
It's so, it's interesting. We were kind of running out of time, but I wanted to talk to you briefly about 30 years ago when you won Best Director and Best Picture for Dances with Wolves. It was one of the greatest years in film back then. I remember it very clearly, and it was a memorable moment in film history because it was the emergence of the modern Western and depiction of Native Americans in mainstream cinema. It was one of the most important ones. Your speech was so great because you rattled off people that will never forget how Dances with Wolves won Best Picture. And you said how it will always be important to you. And I was wondering, 30 years later, how do you feel about it now? Do you still feel the same way?
But feel in what way that it
Like,
was important to me?
yeah,
Well, it was important to me because I wasn't going with the flow when I made that picture. In fact, everything was rooting against it. There was, unbeknownst to me, there was a big kind of movement back in Hollywood before anybody had ever seen the movie, calling it Heaven's Gate, which is code for something that's running over, something that's going wrong. And I was out there with money, that my own money. It was a movie that that no one really wanted to make, and I was passing on a movie, Hunt for Red October, where I could have made the biggest payday of my life, but I had given my word that I would go make that movie. I had already postponed it once because I couldn't solve the ending from a writing standpoint, and I elected to not go out there without knowing exactly how I wanted to end it. And as opposed to going out there and just making it up on the fly. As it so happened in my mind, that year waiting, I actually feel like I became better prepared to actually go out the following year. So, a lot of times we want something right now, but I think in hindsight, one of the best things that happened to me was that year, waiting another year didn't hurt at all. It was important to me because I believe in writing. And so when I see writing, I can't be, that's the direction my career has to go, not towards movies that are trending. I got to get myself in a movie like that. I got to get myself in a movie like this. That the audience is just waiting for fresh air, for something special. And it could be different. It could be something old familiar, but done in a very interesting classic way that no one even recognizes that there's a formula inside it. Because all the setups have a very original way of going about themselves. They come at it from a different angle. And so you don't see the quote unquote formula taking place.
yeah,
If you take a romantic comedy, right? The couple hates each other by first base, hate each other, can't stand each other. By the time you get to second base, you got to find that one scene where they still hate each other, but somebody did something that was interesting. Even though I still don't like them, that was interesting. Then between second and third base, there's kind of starting to look at each other a little bit differently. And the one isn't sure why the other one's looking at them. They think they still hate each other. And then when you get to that third base and you go, you start to see them, fall in love. In the romantic comedy, there is that formula. There's those beats have to somehow happen to get to our end. In a lot of whodunit movies, there's a formula, blah, blah, blah. So I almost forget what my point was, taking you through that exercise. Where was I headed? I was headed towards something. The reason.
well, ultimately, that movie, I mean, it was
Oh,
important for a reason.
yeah. And what it was yeah, I was saying I wasn't trying to repeat anything. I wasn't trying to get in a genre that's a certain winner.
Yeah,
It was just, I believe in the writing and the audience's ability to take that ride, whatever age they are. There's always this, the young generation won't look at this kind of movie and the older one doesn't want to. I don't think that's right. I think that young people are dying for something that's compelling. And if you don't make it compelling, they won't respond. The Western can be kind of boring to somebody, but if you make the right kind of Western, they're unforgettable because you've really orchestrated dramatic moments that force somebody watching to go, I'm not sure I would have known what to do. But if you make a Western that's just a black hat, white hat, those are too simple. And that's why so many Westerns are bad. They're just simple. And the truth is, back then, it was complicated. It was complicated. Yeah, a simpler time. We didn't have telephones. We didn't have blah, blah. But to think that people weren't forced in life and death situations, that's complicated. That's really, and to live a decent life, that's complicated to do. And if you can create those situations, I'm convinced that anybody that's 12 and older is going to go, I love what I just saw. I get that completely, you know, you know. So I believe in an audience, and I put them on my shoulder every time I decide to do something.
That's fascinating to me. And speaking of, my final question, to keep it light, when I was mentioning to my family the other day, you know, what I'm doing in my work, I happened to mention, oh, I'm going to interview Kevin Costner, and each single person at the table had a different film or TV show that they like. I couldn't believe it. It was so funny. One guy said, oh, I loved him in The Untouchables. My mum said Field of Dreams is my favorite movie. My dad said I love JFK. My sister said, oh, The Bodyguard's better. It's the best one. I said he won an Emmy for Hatfields and McCoy. What do you find that is most common when people come to talk to you in public? What do they most want to talk to you about?
That's what the joy was about Dances with Wolves, is it confirmed that it's just the movie, and each movie you make has a chance to be something that someone won't ever forget.
Yeah.
And if you realize that a movie's value is not on its opening weekend, how much it makes, its value is 10 years is somebody willing to share it, 20 years, 30 years. And so what I do is I value that audience experience. And the greatest joy I have is that my career hasn't boiled down to one movie. That, I don't know, between 1 and 14 movies, someone might say that's their favorite movie. I love Waterworld. I love Perfect World. I love Mr. Brooks. I don't know what's coming out of their mouth. I love Fandango. You're never sure. And for me, I would hate to think that my life has been about a single movie.
Yeah,
and it hasn't. And so I think your family, and they should know long before they ever saw the movie, I wanted people to feel that way, that this was their favorite movie.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing to have. And Kevin, thanks so much for a great season 2. We're looking forward to season 3. It's about to premiere. And good luck to you on that one.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Bye-bye.
Everybody go to Gold Derby, make your predictions, click subscribe, and don't forget to watch all of our great chats with contenders just like Kevin.